Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to Women in Preservation, the series that features women who are working to save historic places. I'd like to thank our series sponsor, DMX Architecture of Fayetteville, for their generous support of women in preservation. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your support. If you're not already a member, I'd like to personally invite you to join us for as little as $50 a year. Your memberships provide vital support to our organization and allow us to achieve our mission of saving the state's historic places. You can learn more and become a member at preservearkansas.org. I have a couple announcements of events coming up in May. Preservation Crustaceans returns on May the 6th as a celebration of Arkansas Heritage Month with all-you-can-eat crawfish, shrimp, sausage, and the fixins. Join us for a fun evening on the grounds of St. Joseph's Center of Arkansas, located at the historic St. Joseph's Home in North Little Rock. Guests will enjoy live music by Brooklyn Fogel, tours of the historic St. Joseph's Home building, and more. Buy tickets, become a sponsor, or sign up to volunteer on our website at preservearkansas.org. Preserve Arkansas, in partnership with the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design, will hold its next Mid-Mod Arkansas tour in Fayetteville on May 19th and 20th. This tour series moves across the state, and the goal of it is to increase appreciation for Arkansas's unique mid-century modern architecture. This tour will begin on Friday evening with a reception at the Warren Seagraves designed Fulbright Building in Fayetteville, and it will continue on Saturday with a bus tour featuring several very notable homes that you can see on your screen. It will conclude on Saturday evening with a reception at Vol Walker Hall, where there will be a new exhibition of Edward Durrell Stone designed furniture on view. Tickets for this tour are going fast. If you're interested, I'd encourage you to go ahead and get yours at preservearkansas.org. Join us next month for a talk by Natalie Henshaw, Director of the Campaign for Historic Trades based in Baltimore, Maryland. If you've ever tried to hire craftsmen that were trained in historic trades, you know how important it is that we encourage this training for the next generation. So I look forward to hearing what Natalie has to share with us on May the 9th. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this afternoon's speakers, Dianne Curry and Alison Turner. Dianne Curry is a native of Malvern, Arkansas. She graduated from Henderson State University with a degree in business administration. She received a master's degree in business and marketing from Kaplan University. Dianne retired after 27 years of service as a state employee working in education and bank audit and finance. She is a Pulaski County Quorum Court member. She was previously appointed by 2 governors to serve on the Arkansas Service Commission on Volunteerism, and has also served as an officer for local and state PTA as a legislative liaison. She is a recipient of the Lifetime PTA Penn Award. Dianne is a proud member of Union AME Church, working as a missionary, local lay officer, and Arkansas Conference lay officer, choir member, and social action chair at church and the Arkansas Conference. Dianne is also a spokesperson and volunteer for the Alex Foundation. Alison Turner is an architectural designer and teacher. In 2008, she started her own practice, Studio Architecture and Design, that focuses on residential and commercial projects with an emphasis on regional, environmentally responsive, and sustainable architecture. Also in 2008, she began teaching at the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design, where she teaches design studio, environmental technology, and various elective courses revolving around issues of sustainability and housing. Alison Turner received her Master of Architecture degree from Parsons School of Design and her Bachelor of Interior Architecture from Kansas State University. After graduating from Parsons, she spent several years practicing in New York City before moving to Fayetteville. Turner is also involved with community outreach programs to teach young students about design and the profession of architecture. She leads the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design's Summer Design Camp and has participated in the Alex Foundation's STEAM Architecture Program for students, the Women's Foundation of Arkansas Girls of Promise, and Scouting University on the University of Arkansas campus. We're going to begin with Dianne Curry. So please welcome Dianne. I'm going to turn your camera on, Dianne. I'll go ahead and get your PowerPoint pulled up for you.
Okay, I'm here.
You look good. Let me get your show pulled up really quick.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I said I would really quick. Let me find it. It's not coming up.
Okay, thank you.
There it is. Okay, you are good to go. You just tell me when you want the slides advanced and I'll change them for you.
Okay, you can go ahead and advance. Okay, thank you. The Alice Foundation is based out of Halley, Arkansas, an unincorporated community in Deshay County, population about 70 residents. We are the suburbs of Arkansas City, Dermot, McGee, Dumas, Lake Village, Monticello, Greenville, and Greenville, Mississippi, probably about 15 or 20 miles from there. We are a 501c3 volunteer service nonprofit organization. The mission of the Alex Foundation is to introduce students and educators to Architech. You can advance the slide. You can advance one more time. Thank you. The place-based learning. One of the ways we introduce Architect to students and educators is by teaching what historic places through place-based learning. With this, students and educators explore buildings and structures that are heritage-based, culturally relevant, historically significant, and repurpose or adaptive reuse. Advance. For instance, the first designers of the Americas is like the Winterville Mounds. The next one, if you will advance it, I believe it's the Belmont Plantation. There's several. I'm going to kind of go across here. The next one is the Japanese American Interment Museum in McGee, Arkansas, local. Let me see what this other one is. There is the building, kind of like a museum that's in the city of Lake Village. Then that really historical building, my apology, just a second here, is the Hollywood Plantation Archaeological and Historic Preservation in Southeast Arkansas. Is that building. Thank you. Can you advance the slide? Now I'm going to share a little bit about one of the historic buildings in Arkansas City, and that is the John H. Johnson Museum. The University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, City of Arkansas City, and DeShay County created a partnership back in 1998 to establish the John H. Johnson Museum, an educational center in honor of John H. Johnson, the first Black American to be on the Forbes list of richest Americans. The great grandson of slaves, Mr. Johnson was born in extreme poverty in Arkansas City in 1918. He and his family moved to Chicago because there were no schools for Black students in Arkansas City beyond the 8th grade. He established Johnson Publishing Company in Chicago in 1942 with $500 from his mother's, where he sold furniture for his mother as collateral. He was founder of the iconic Ebony and Jet magazine and served on numerous corporate boards. 20th Century Fox Film Corporation, Greyhound, Bell and Howell, Zenith, Continental Bank, Dillard's Department Store, Chrysler, and many others. He received many distinguished awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Just a little bit more, if you would advance, about John H. Johnson, and you see the signs there. John H. Johnson Museum and John H. Johnson Day are curated and managed by Friends of John H. Johnson Museum, a 501c3 profit volunteer service organization. The museum is located, as stated, in Arkansas City and is a replica of his boyhood home for John H. Johnson. Johnson's original home was complicated by the 1927 flood and was unable to be restored. Alex Foundation partners with the John H. Johnson Museum and Friends Museum during our National American Institute of Architect award-winning architect summer camps has been established and has been ongoing for some time, for the last, 5 years or so. Future projects, if you will advance the slide. Future projects to honor Mr. Johnson include John H. Johnson Park, owned and managed by Arkansas State Park and funding by the Walton Family Foundation. The park is part of the Delta Heritage Trail, an 84-mile heritage trail from Helena, Arkansas to Arkansas City. If you advance one more time. We're excited about the museum being built here in the next couple of years, and it will be in celebration of 75 years of Ebony Magazine, National Museum of African American History and Culture, John H. Johnson. If you advance the next slide. Out of this, the Alex Foundation has been a program established called a STEAM program. STEM program is an initiative that exposes students and educators to the interdisciplinary connections that link technical and creative skills with architect. For more information about the Alex Foundation, you can visit www.alexfoundation.org. Advance the slide from here.
That's your last slide, Dianne.
Okay. And from here, I'd like to introduce Ms. Alison Turner, our next speaker. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dianne.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dianne. I really appreciate everything that the Alex Foundation does, and I really appreciate also that I have had the opportunity to work with the Alex Foundation on multiple occasions. Just want to make sure that you can see my screen okay. Yes.
It looks good, Allison.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
So I just wanted to, I guess, I feel like I'm trying to talk about myself and the work I do a little bit. I wear a lot of different hats. So as Rachel mentioned when she introduced me earlier, I do have my own practice, which is Studio Architecture and Design, and I do focus my work on place-based, environmentally responsive architecture and design, which is mostly single-family houses, and my practice is really just me. And then I am also a teaching assistant professor of architecture at the University of Arkansas in the Fay Jones School, and have been since 2008. And then another role that I play within the Fay Jones School is I'm the director of community education. So I do all of our K through 12 design outreach, which is where I overlap quite often with the Alex Foundation in trying to connect with students throughout the state of Arkansas and bring design education and really just interest and excitement about architecture and design to students. So I'm going to kind of just briefly talk about some of the things I do in my practice, because what I really want to focus on is the outreach work that I do for the school, in particular, the outreach and some of the overlaps with the Alex Foundation as well. So when I started my practice, I chose the name Sitio, which is a Spanish word, which essentially means site or location. It specifically connects to a place or a building site, because I very much feel that my work is rooted in not only the landscape, but in the context of the cities that I'm designing for. So I've always been just really drawn to the landscape in Arkansas in particular. I'm not a native to Arkansas, but now I've been here for 20 years. And the landscape is still one of my favorite components or one of my favorite things about living in Arkansas. I do spend a lot of time outdoors, and I try to make as many connections as possible in connecting to the physical place with the buildings. So this is a project. This is actually the first project I designed in Arkansas like 20 years ago, but I think it really sums up some of the principles and ideas about how I like to connect my work to the environment. Not only thinking about how it works with the environment in terms of sun, wind, light, materials, things like that, but then also how the spaces themselves become part of the landscape, and then let the people that occupy the spaces really enjoy being in the landscape. So this is a project that's in Northwest Arkansas. It's actually located on Beaver Lake. And I was really interested in this idea of transparency so that you can kind of see through the house as you're approaching the house. I was also interested in kind of the way that water runoff worked around in the site. So part of the house is actually elevated so that it didn't disrupt some of the natural flows of water in and around the site. Also tried to keep as many trees as possible. So really just nestling this house within the landscape itself. And some interior views, which one of the things when you're inside the house, I wanted you to constantly be connected to the natural environment. So every time you kind of turn around, you get a different view or a different perspective. And as you're moving through the house, you're constantly reminded of the place. And I'm not going to show you every single project I've done, but just a few other projects that are some of my favorites that I've worked on over the years. Again, these are all projects that are similar to the one I just showed you, where it has a very natural site. And some of the principles are similar. We're trying to embed it into the natural landscape, but also taking into consideration elements of sun, wind, light, trying to reduce the amount of energy that a house will produce if you can design it in a way that it's sort of self-shading, or that it can take in sun passively in the wintertime. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but this diagram here is something I do for all my projects I'm working on, just to think about how the building itself is going to interact with those kind of invisible forces like the sun and the wind and daylight, but also thinking about how it is works with the ground, whether it's embedding into the ground or elevating above the ground, and different things like that. So I'm not really going to spend much time talking about what I do at the Faye Jones School in terms of teaching, but I just threw these up here just to show some of the things that I'm talking about in my practice definitely relate to some of the courses that I teach. So I do teach our environmental technology class, which is it's a required class, a required core class for our second year architecture students. And this is where they are introduced to passive principles of environmental design. So this is where we talk about daylight. We talk about heat from the sun and how to either capitalize on it, like for solar heating in the wintertime, or to try to get rid of it by doing things like solar shading. I also teach several elective courses that tie very closely again to things I'm thinking about. One of those is a course I call SIGHT, which is teaching students to really invest time and energy, but also just kind of being able to connect and think about how projects can be part of the site and start to, and I'm showing you a lot of sites that are, the projects that I showed you have a lot of connection to landscape, but also if a student has a project in an urban site, how can you start to think about the context and the history and all the layers of the site to start to inform your design proposal. And another course I teach is called Regional, where just looking at regions around the world, we look at Northwest Arkansas, but we also look at other regions around the world, and how architects and designers are thinking about building within that place and what that looks like in different parts of the world. And sometimes that is driven by environmental factors, sometimes it's driven by material factors, sometimes it's driven by indigenous forms and traditions and cultural traditions that happen to be a part of that particular place. Okay, so then again, like I said, what I really wanted to focus on is just talking about some of the outreach that I do within the school. And as Rachel mentioned, one of the big components of that outreach is our summer design camp. And this is our poster for the camp for this summer. And it's grown and changed over the years. I've been directing the design camp for I think about 10 years now, something like that. And so this summer we have 2 week-long camps for students who are in high school, so entering in 9th through 12th grades. We also have a 2-week advanced camp for students going into 11th and 12th grade. And this is for students who in particular have had some experience with architecture and design, whether they've come to our camp in the past or they have taken classes in high school or participated in some sort of community design or building project. And then we also have a final virtual camp. This is sort of, we started during COVID and we're still kind of continuing it because we still have interest in students who want to join us online. Just also to note, the camp costs are listed here, and you could also find more information on our website, which I think is fayejones.uark.edu. I feel like it should be on here, but I don't see it. We do have need-based scholarships for any student who's on free and reduced lunch. They can come to our camp for free. And then one thing we are doing new this year is for our Fayetteville 1 camp, which is the June 12th through 16th camp, we have a transportation option And this was kind of started working with the Alex Foundation. In the past, they have helped provide transportation to students in Deschutes County. And that's just become a bit of a hardship. So we're trying to fill that void. So we have transportation that's going to make stops in Lake Village, Monticello, Pine Bluff, and Little Rock. So anyway, if anybody's interested in that, you can find me on the fayjones.uark.edu website, and I'm happy to answer more questions about that. Just to give you, just a sense of what a week at our camp looks like. What I really try to do at the camp is not to necessarily teach the students design skills, because they can get that if they decide to come and study architecture and design, whether at the Fay Jones School or at another school, but really just to get a sense of like, what do designers do? What would it be like to be an architect or a landscape architect or an interior architect? So within a week, we pack a lot of stuff in. The students actually work on design projects that we give them. We do a lot of tours and talk about different aspects of architecture and design. So you can kind of see some of those images. And since this is a presentation for the Women Preservation in Arkansas, I just wanted to highlight, I think any design education, of course, includes components of historic preservation and architectural history, and we certainly incorporate those components into our design camp. So just kind of highlighting some of those moments where we typically will visit Cooper Chapel in Bella Vista, especially in the Fayetteville camps. And while we're at Cooper, it's a really great place for us to talk about Fay Jones, talk about the work of Fay Jones, and who Fay was as a person and as an architect. We follow that up by visiting the Arkansas Architectural Archive, and there's Kat Wallach there showing some of the design students, some of the drawings from the archive, and just talking about kind of the history of some of the buildings within the state, and it kind of varies on what she decides to show us each year. We have also been going to visit the building and sort of the firm that Fay Jones built, which is now currently being occupied by Jennings Santa Rita Architects, which I would argue is really continuing the legacy of Fay Jones. With the spirit of Fay Jones, I think is very much a part of their work. Other things that we do related to preservation, we go to Crystal Bridges as well. We see the Bachman-Wilson House by Frank Lloyd Wright. We see the Fly's Eye Dome by Buckminster Fuller. And sometimes another visit might be going to the University of Arkansas Community Design Center. A lot of their projects typically involve some component of historic preservation through a community outreach effort. So another community outreach project I just wanted to kind of talk about a little bit. In 2020, we pivoted to having a completely virtual platform. So we came up with Fay Design Virtual Education. This was sort of a very, very quick pivot for us, as I know a lot of people in 2020 were panicking and trying to redesign the way that they do things. We were doing the same thing with our design camp. And when I met with Dean Peter McKeith and Associate Dean Ethel Goodstein Murphy, and we were kind of brainstorming about what can we do to still bring this design education to high school students for the summer. But we really did, even at that early part in the pandemic, everyone was already sick of Zoom. So we decided, instead of doing a Zoom camp, to create a video series. And the video series was 25 videos in total, and broken down to, like, we started thinking about all the things that we do at camp and how can we start to create these video segments that start to capture all of the education that happens in the different regards to the different components of camp. So you can see this is just a snapshot of all 25 videos. So within that, we are leading the students through design projects they can do at home. There's some sketching exercises you see and some design exercises. We have students in one video talking about what it's like to be a design student and things that people should think about in high school. There's this one at the top center was talking about model building. We've got Dean McKeith underneath that one, kind of introducing the school itself. And then just similar to our camp itself, in the video series, we were, of course, incorporating some of the historic preservation aspects that we include in the design camp as well. So we did have one video down in the orange in the corner where the video was completely about Fay Jones, who Fay was, what his work is about, and what his legacy has been to us in Arkansas, and particularly to us at the Fay Jones School. So you see Greg Herman sitting in front of the Fay and Gus Jones house, and we spent a lot of time talking about that house in that video. And then we have Ethel Goodstein Murphy talking about Edward Durrell Stone. We did an entire video on Ed Stone's work. In the center, we did a video on Marlon Blackwell and his work, and he talked about 3 projects in Northwest Arkansas. And one of the projects he talked about was the Gentry Library in Gentry, Arkansas, which was an adaptive reuse project that he did early in his career, that I think really highlights that kind of the history of the building itself. It actually starts to think of the building itself as a something that's on display. So kind of keeping the character and the history of the building while inserting these modern interventions within it. So we also saw, since we visit the archive, we interviewed Kat Wallach and talked about what the Arkansas Architectural Archive is and the types of drawings that are kept in that archive. And then, I just one other thing, we are also talking about resiliency in design. We found an opportunity for us to kind of highlight that as a subject. And so we have one of our alumni, Tura Bethel, who's from the Bahamas, talking about how things are designed in her home country to think about like tropical storms and hurricanes and things like that. And so how you can design with thinking about how things might be able to withstand that kind of force. So these videos are all still available on YouTube. So if you wanted to look it up, you can look up Fay Design, or the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design, and then the Fay Design Virtual Education. And then continuing this, so for our virtual design camp, we worked with Arkansas PBS. One thing I forgot to mention is that we created all of the videos with grant funding from the Alice Walton Foundation. So that really helped us and enabled us to be able to hire the whole camera crew and to help us put together those videos. So then we turned this into a virtual platform with Arkansas PBS and their Arkansas PBS Learn platform. So we've embedded all of the videos and content into this online platform. And I'm going to go through this quickly, but just to kind of show you what it looks like with the videos embedded, and the students can go through it, watch the video clips, they can upload their work, they can, this has like hotspots in the video to learn about different components where the video clips are pulled out, and then this is a student uploading some of their work. So another component for me for my outreach is I do a lot of workshops. And this is where I overlap with the Alex Foundation as well. So I have been part of the STEAM program that the Alex Foundation does. And a couple of these images are actually from some of the workshops that I've done. This one, I think with the tall tower here was at Cornerstone. I think there was one where I'm in Monticello. Actually, I think the image with the kind of glass building blocks was in Monticello. Anyway, so yeah, so just like, and the workshops can vary. sometimes like the one in the bottom left corner, those were kindergartners. So just thinking about how to reach a student who is only 5 or 6 years old versus how to reach a high school student and talk about design. So I have lots of different projects that I've done over the course of the last 10 years or so. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of those workshops that have happened recently and that I think are pretty significant. So a year ago in March 2022, the Fay Jones School rededicated our East Entry portal and named it after Wally Carradine. So it's the Wallace Reed Carradine Memorial Entry. And so Wally Carradine was the first African-American graduate of the Fay Jones School. And he went on to do a lot of significant work in Little Rock. And he was also an amazing mentor for a lot of students and employees who came after him. So as part of this day, we invited students from Pine Bluff, Arkansas to come and spend the day with us. So there's a couple of the pictures at the top show some of the students participating in the ceremony that we had. And then after the ceremony, we did a tour of the campus and we did a workshop with them. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of the workshop for some reason, but one of the things we did in that workshop was we created an activity book specific for kind of to celebrate the day and to celebrate Wally Carradine. So this is just kind of all the images of the pages of this workbook to show you some of the things that we did. So one of the things we did, so on the campus tour, they had a map that they could follow along. And then on the campus tour, the tour guides who were our Fay Jones School students were pointing out some of these design terms that they could refer to, and they could sketch in their activity book and make notes about some of the different design vocabulary words. Then there's some, some terms and kind of a word search. And then down here we have some things that they could color or they could make notes on, which is, of course, a portrait of Wally himself. And then some images of Wally's projects, some of his more significant projects in Little Rock. Another component of that was a buildable model. So on this page, the second to the right on the bottom, the students could cut the pieces out, and then the little dashes indicate where they would fold the pieces to create one, a small model of one of Wally's projects. And then finally, we finished that out with here the instructions for a campus community project, which is something that we did, kind of hands-on project that we did as a group with them at the school. Another workshop that I wanted to talk about was I worked with the Missouri History Museum in St. Louis for a workshop that we called Let's Build a City. And the idea behind this one was for the students to start to think about, I wanted them to think about their own city. I wanted them to think about St. Louis and what makes St. Louis a great city. What are the components of the city? And so I divided the students into teams of into six teams, sorry. And each team had a table that was covered in paper, and then they were given these blocks that they could manipulate in however way they wanted to. And then the task was that each table was a neighborhood. And so they were talking to each other, thinking about, well, what makes a really great neighborhood? What things do we want to have in our neighborhood? And then they had to talk to the people that were adjacent to them, to the adjacent neighborhoods, to start thinking about larger scale connections and larger scale moments that happened in the city. And then when they were done with their neighborhoods, we pushed all the tables together, and that's the image that you see on the right is the full city. So you can see the road that kind of one of the main arteries that goes through the city. It got a little off on that table right there, but the idea was that it goes all the way through the city. And then each neighborhood kind of had its own character and quality. I took that idea with working with the Alex Foundation, I went to visit Lakeside High School. And one of the things I asked the students to do, I had printed out a large Google map of Lake Village. And I brought those blocks with me. And then I wanted to talk to the students about their city. I wanted them to tell me about the city, things that they thought were important, things that they wanted, like if they could imagine what Lake Village would look like in 20 years, how would they start to change it? What buildings had importance, significance to them that they would want to keep, and what things would they want to change, and how would they want Lake Village to grow in the future? So it provoked a lot of interesting conversations with the students. And then because I do so many of these workshops, and oftentimes they're really, really quick, and so it's trying to find a tool to get the students to think about design and to think about making something three-dimensional in a short period of time. So I created this sort of building tool with my colleague Rachel Smith-Lortz, which we called Planes. And so we're kind of developing this and potentially getting this trademarked and trying to get it out into the world for educators to be able to use in their classrooms. And just some images of things that when I don't give the students any parameters, things that they have built using the planes. And then this is another workshop at the Fay Jones School where we're using the planes and we're using paper on the table. So similar to some of the things I've shown you, but I've given the students a particular directive on things I'm looking for them to design. And in this case, I was asking them to design a neighborhood. And so the students in this case, and the ones in the foreground, all like we're competing with each other to design the kind of coolest house, and trying to get them to also think about community components of their neighborhood. But I think it ultimately became a contest of who could build the coolest house. Anyway, that's pretty much an overview of some of the work that I'm doing.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Okay. Diane, if you want to come back on, and I'll invite anyone to type your questions in the chat or Q&A for Diane and Allison. There is one question. Will you, Allison, send me a copy of the flyer for Design Camp that I can then distribute to people who are registered for this webinar?
Yes, absolutely. So you want me to send that to you, Rachel, and you can distribute?
Yes, that'd be great.
Yes, absolutely. Love to.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, anyone else?
Allison, amazing job.
Yes, it was a very good presentation. We have plenty of time for questions if y'all have them out there in the virtual audience. And in the meantime, I've got a few questions. I'll start with Diane. Okay. How did you learn about the Alex Foundation, and why did you get involved?
Well, just so happened, Miss Courtney and I go back as friends for probably about 25 years or so. And of course, my son and my daughter and her son went to high school together. And of course, her son was Alex, and which the foundation is named after. And so I've got involved, well, I had been involved for some number of years in education, of course, and a volunteer in the public schools and around. So we've been friends for a number of years, and she called on me, do anything I can do to help, probably go across country if necessary, but just involved with trying to improve the quality of education for children in general. And we've just been friends and worked on education projects a lot.
That's a very good reason. Thank you. And Diane, for both of you really for this one, but how do people learn about opportunities to get involved with the Alex Foundation or these other organizations that you may have participated or worked with, Allison? So either one of you, how do people learn about opportunities to volunteer? Are there places to volunteer?
Allison, you want to go first, or?
If you want to talk about the Alex Foundation specifically first, and then I can maybe add on.
Okay, what I'd say with the Alex Foundation, of course, the workshops are coming, and I know that the Alex Foundation has been very instrumental in the past on getting students to the camp. So I think once you get the flyer and make that connection, and I can probably type in the chat the website for the Alex Foundation, and you can go on there and sign up to volunteer, because she has different projects that she do ongoing. So I'll make sure I put that website address in there. Okay.
And I know also with the Alex Foundation, they are usually looking for money too, right? To
A
support
donation.
to support some of the programs and things like that. So even if it's not actually physically volunteering, I think volunteering monetary support is also useful to that organization. This question is actually a little bit difficult for me, because the Alex Foundation is one of the only organizations in Arkansas that I am aware of outside of the profession itself that is doing anything in terms of design, education, and outreach. I mean, we do our share within the school, and I definitely work with architects and designers across the state who are trying to they have different initiatives and programs. There's one, sorry, and I might completely forget what it's called. I think it's called Rise in Little Rock. That's another one. Sorry.
I'm not
I
sure.
feel like but that's another one that that is being started by, that has been recently started by local architects in Little Rock, with the purpose of working with students in Little Rock and trying to get them interested in architecture and design. Rise. Okay.
In the comments,
Right.
that is called Rise. Yes, thank you. And, I just wanted to say as a point that how I met Angela Courtney and knew about the Alex Foundation was because she was having students come and sketch and learn about historic properties in Southeast Arkansas. And so I know the point was to really make them sketch and think like designers and architects and learn about that and try to foster that interest. But unknowingly, maybe that she was also encouraging them to pursue preservation in just the idea that it was important that these places were still there and that they were preserved and well cared for. And so, whether she knows it or not, the Alex Foundation is also trying to encourage a preservation ethic in those young people.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. Alison, you worked as a designer first, and then how did you get interested in teaching?
Yeah, well, I think actually my interest in teaching started when I was in grad school. I am definitely not, growing up, I was never the person raising my hand wanting to talk in class. So the idea of being a teacher was not something I ever saw for myself when I was younger. But when I was in grad school, I definitely found working with my classmates in the studio environment that collaboration and like talking about design, even outside of class time. And I definitely started having some of my classmates come to me wanting me to give them like desk crits and things like that outside of studio time. So I just thought, well, hey, this is something that I actually enjoy doing. So I did practice for a while, but the bug had been planted. And so as soon as I had the opportunity, when I moved to Fayetteville and I knew that there was a really good school of architecture and design, I was here for a couple of years before I reached out to Tim DeNoble, who was the department head in architecture at that point in time. And he hired me, and I've been here ever since.
We're glad you're doing that in Fayetteville. Where are you from? You didn't say that in your earlier part.
I didn't. I'm originally from Kansas City. So
Okay.
Kansas City, and I went to K-State, spent some time in New York City, and then moved to Fayetteville. And you can't get me to leave Fayetteville, I don't think. I love it here.
That's good. Okay, we have some people in the comments sharing information for RISE on the Studio Maine website. And Melissa Dyson, we have a Tinkerization Station program where we partner with cities and schools that tie in art, architecture, and engineering. And Melissa, if you want to put in the chat, maybe if there's a link to more info on that for people, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, let's see. I have another question for Alison. Can you talk about how building techniques of the past help to inform sustainable design today?
Yeah. Now, I really love this question. And that's one of the things I talk about, particularly with my students. And in my environmental technology course that I teach, that's one of the things I use as a foundation. So just talking about vernacular architecture and indigenous architecture, because if we look at how people historically built in particular places, we can learn a lot about how to build within the natural environment. Because we kind of forgot how to do that for about 50 years once air conditioning was invented. But if you go back and you look at, like, I love looking at the how European settlers, when they came to what is now the United States, the way they were building what they knew, and then as they started migrating to different portions of the country, the form of the houses started to change based on factors of climate. Like when you get further south, you see bigger porches, bigger windows, things like that. So I definitely look at those vernacular examples when I'm talking to students about designing within the environment. Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, they had a lot of things figured out because they
Yes.
had to.
Yes. And we definitely forgot how to do all that. So.
Okay, well, I don't see any other questions or comments. And it looks like we lost Dianne, but I really appreciate you speaking, Alison. Thank you so much for your presentation. And thank you to Dianne too. And thank you all for watching. And I hope to see you next month.